The neonatal wing of Mercy General Hospital usually carried a kind of hushed serenity. Soft lights, machines breathing in quiet rhythm, nurses moving like ghosts in white shoes. But tonight, the silence didn't soothe Tiana Brooks. If anything, it felt like a thin shell barely covering the ache inside her chest. 3 months had passed since she lost her baby boy. 3 months since she'd stood in this very hallway, empty arms and broken heart, watching the world move on while hers had collapsed. Her body still remembered him, every ache, every phantom twitch, every instinct that screamed. She was still a mother, even when she no longer had a child to hold. Her breasts still betrayed her, with the familiar heaviness, a reminder of everything she had lost. But nothing had prepared her for the sound she heard now. A cry, sharp, jagged, desperate, shattered the quiet like glass hitting the floor. She froze. It wasn't the typical wail of a hungry newborn. This one sounded raw, almost panicked, as if the tiny lungs behind it knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. Her heart clenched, and before she could think, her feet were already moving toward the observation room. Through the glass window, she saw him. A man stood in the center of the nursery, illuminated by the dim amber lights overhead. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his white dress shirt wrinkled and undone at the collar. His expensive suit jacket was thrown over a chair forgotten. His normally immaculate blonde hair was a disheveled mess, as if he'd been running his hands through it for hours. But it was his face that made her stop breathing. A man that powerful wasn't supposed to look defeated. Yet his blue eyes were rimmed red, his jaw tight with fear, his hands trembling as he tried to comfort the screaming infant in his arms. Tiana recognized him immediately. Marcus Bell. The Marcus Bell. Billionaire CEO of Bell Tech. Media darling. Charismatic tech prodigy. A man whose face graced magazine covers and financial reports, not hospital nurseries at 2 in the morning. What in the world was he doing here alone? The baby girl in his arms writhed, her tiny face flushed crimson from the relentless crying. Something tugged violently inside Tiana's chest. Maternal instinct, muscle memory, grief. She wasn't sure. But before she allowed herself to think, before she could stop herself, she pushed the door open. "Sir," she whispered, voice gentle, "is everything all right?" He turned sharply, startled. For a moment, he only stared at her, like he wasn't used to asking for help, like he didn't know how. Up close, he looked even worse. His tie hung loose as though he'd ripped it off. His eyes were wild with exhaustion. He smelled faintly of cologne and panic. "She won't eat," he said hoarsely. "Nothing's working. Formula donor milk. Different bottles. I don't know what to do." His voice cracked on the last word. Tiana stepped closer, scanning the baby automatically. Skin warm, too warm, lips dry. The frantic rooting reflex of a newborn starving for comfort. "How long has she refused to feed?" she asked softly. "Since her mother." His voice faltered. He swallowed hard. "Since she passed." Tiana's heart stuttered. She hadn't known that part of the story. She'd heard whispers from staff complications, emergency C-section, a tragic outcome, but she hadn't connected the dots. She hadn't known the grieving husband was Marcus Bell. And now, she was looking at him, a man with the world at his feet, standing here, helpless, cradling the one thing he couldn't buy, replace, or control. "May I?" Tiana asked quietly, nodding to the baby. He hesitated just a second before handing her over. The moment the baby settled into Tiana's arms, the crying shifted. Not quieter, but different. Hopeful. Searching. And then Tiana felt it. That familiar involuntary pull in her chest. The tingling. The pressure. Milk. Oh no. Not now. Her breath hitched. She hadn't been near a newborn since losing David. She had avoided this wing entirely because her body always betrayed her like this. The ache was back. The grief was back. And standing in front of Marcus Bell of all people made the moment feel unbearably intimate. She swallowed hard. "She's hungry," she murmured. "I know," he whispered, sounding like he was breaking. "I know. And I can't help her." The baby Hope turned her tiny face toward Tiana's chest, rooting desperately. Tiana froze. She shouldn't even consider it. It would cross boundaries she wasn't sure she could survive crossing. It could trigger every wound she had spent months trying to stitch closed. And standing here, a black nurse, holding the child of a white billionaire, she could already feel the weight of judgment from an invisible world that didn't know their pain. But then, she looked at Hope's tiny trembling fists, and she felt something inside her crack open, a part of her she thought had died with her son. Without thinking, she whispered, "I could help." Marcus blinked, confused. "What do you mean? You've already tried what the nurses—" She shook her head, stepping closer. "No, I mean, I could feed her." Silence. Heavy, stunned silence. Marcus stared at her as the meaning filtered in. His breath caught. His eyes widened slightly, not with disgust, but with something dangerously close to hope. "You mean—" His voice dropped to a whisper. "You'd nurse her." Tiana's throat tightened. "I lost my son 3 months ago," she said, barely audible. "My body still remembers." Marcus closed his eyes as if the weight of the world had just shifted. "Tiana," he breathed. "You would do that, I can try," she whispered. But inside, she wasn't sure if she could handle it. If she could survive holding another baby so close to her heart. If she could open the door she had forced shut ever since David died. Yet her arms were already adjusting the baby, her breath already sinking to the tiny, desperate movements of Hope's rooting mouth. She moved to the rocking chair, her hands trembling. "Only if you're comfortable with it," she murmured. "I am," Marcus said instantly, stepping closer. His voice broke. "Please, anything that will help her." The sincerity in his tone surprised her. He didn't sound like a billionaire used to commanding rooms. He sounded like a man clinging to his last lifeline. Tiana took a deep, shaky breath. She shifted her scrubs. Hope pressed her warm cheek against Tiana's skin. And then, the baby latched. The world held its breath. Marcus covered his mouth, tears forming instantly. His entire body collapsed into the nearest chair, his hands trembling as he stared at the miracle in front of him. Hope suckled hungrily, desperately, her small fingers curling against Tiana's chest. A warm rush of emotion washed over her, grief, relief, love, pain, longing mixing into something indescribable. Something she thought she would never feel again. A mother's purpose. Her own tears spilled silent and unstoppable. She heard Marcus sob quietly behind his hands. In the soft glow of the nursery lights, they were 2 broken people stitched together by a tiny life that neither of them fully understood yet. Hope drank and drank until her little body relaxed completely, until her fists unclenched, until the crying faded into soft breaths. Her warm weight settled against Tiana's heart like she belonged there, and maybe in some strange cosmic twist she did. When Hope finally drifted to sleep, Marcus whispered, "You saved her." He wasn't looking at Hope, he was looking at her. Tiana swallowed, overwhelmed. This can't be normal," she whispered. "You don't even know me." "I know what I saw tonight," he said softly. "And I know that for the first time since Charlotte died, my daughter is safe." His voice cracked again, and Tiana felt something dangerous blooming inside her chest. Something warm. Something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months. Connection. Belonging. Hope. Suddenly she realized how risky this was, not just medically or ethically, but emotionally. This moment tied her to Marcus and Hope in a way neither of them could undo. And deep down, she already knew. Nothing about tonight would stay simple. As she handed Hope back to Marcus, their fingers brushed for the first time. A spark shot through her arm. He felt it too. His breath hitched. "Tiana," he said quietly, carefully, as if her name itself were something fragile. "I don't know how to repay you." "You don't have to," she whispered. But they both knew it wasn't true. Some debts weren't meant to be repaid. Some were meant to change lives. As Tiana left the nursery, her hand trembled on the doorknob. She looked back one last time. Marcus was holding Hope close to his chest, rocking her gently. His blue eyes lifted to meet hers. And in that silent exchange, something shifted. Not just for him, not just for her, but for all three of them. A ripple in the universe. A beginning she never saw coming. A bond that would pull them together again and again, until pretending it didn't mean something extraordinary became impossible. And then, just before she stepped out of the room, Tiana heard Hope cry again. Not in distress, but in longing, reaching for the only person who had eased her pain. A shiver ran down Tiana's spine. This wasn't over. Not even close. And the night was about to get even more complicated. The moment the baby's tiny lips brushed against her skin, Tiana felt her entire body go rigid. It wasn't pain, nothing so simple. It was recognition. A primal memory, awakening, like a long-forgotten instinct, rising from the depths of her bones. A soft, wet pop broke the air as the newborn tried again, rooting harder, frantic. Then finally, latching. The nursery fell into a strange kind of silence. Not the restful, sleepy hush typical of the night shift, but a charged electric quiet, a suspension, as if even the air stopped breathing to witness this impossible intimate moment. Hope's cries cut off, instantly dissolving into soft, rhythmic gulps. Tiana felt the first tear before she even realized she was crying. Hot, fast, uncontrollable. Her hands trembled as she supported the tiny head nestled against her chest, but she didn't dare adjust or shift. Every small movement felt sacred, fragile. She was terrified that any sudden motion would break the spell and the baby would slip away again. But the biggest shock came when she lifted her gaze. Marcus Bell, the man the world knew as a polished, brilliant titan of industry, was crying. Not silently, not with quiet dignity. He was bent forward, elbows on his knees, face cradled in his palms, shoulders shaking with unrestrained guttural sobs. A man who negotiated billion-dollar deals without flinching now looked like he'd been cracked down the middle. It was almost too intimate to witness. Tiana's throat closed. The contrast between them, his expensive watch glinting under the fluorescent lights, and her hospital scrubs stained with the dull fatigue of overwork, had never felt so stark. A white man from the highest echelon of American wealth undone by grief, being steadied by a black nurse who had lost everything herself. This wasn't a scene either of their worlds would ever have imagined. He didn't look up for a long time, and Tiana was grateful for it. She needed a moment too, a moment to breathe through the stab of grief clawing its way up from the part of her heart she'd kept barricaded. David. The name burned her silently. Her son's name. The baby she couldn't save. Her milk let down harder at the thought. Another betrayal of her own body, reacting as if her child were still alive. A soft whimper from the newborn pulled her back. Hope clung to her, as though she had found the one warm place left in a cold world. Her tiny fingers curled instinctively against Tiana's chest, anchoring her, grounding her, breaking her. By the time Marcus lifted his head, his tears clung to his lashes, making him look unbearably human. "She's calm," he whispered, almost afraid to say it aloud, as though speaking might undo it. Tiana nodded, unable to speak, past the lump in her throat. His eyes flicked to her first, to her face, then to Hope, then back again. And something shifted in his expression, softened, deepened. A silent thank you, a quiet reverence, and something else, something she didn't dare name. How did you do that?" he asked finally. His voice was raw. Tiana inhaled shakily. She wasn't sure she had the strength to explain aloud what had happened inside her. The memories, the instinct, the grief she'd fought so hard to cage. "I didn't do anything," she murmured. "Your daughter knew what she needed. I just let her." But the truth pressed against her ribs until she felt she would burst. "My body still remembers my son. My heart still does too." Hope's sucking slowed, growing lazier, sleepier, until the tiny body melted into a warm, peaceful weight. A weight Tiana had once known intimately. A weight she once prayed she would feel for years. She lowered her head and pressed a trembling kiss to Hope's forehead. Marcus watched the gesture with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. His breathing hitched, not from sadness this time, but from something dangerously close to awe. "You saved her," he whispered, the words barely audible. Tiana closed her eyes. She couldn't handle that kind of gratitude. Not when she felt so broken herself. Hope finished nursing, her tiny mouth falling open in that familiar milk-drunk bliss. Tiana slowly adjusted her scrubs and lifted the baby higher onto her shoulder, patting her gently, instinctively. The first tiny burp made Marcus exhale shakily. She's never looked this peaceful," he murmured. "Not once." Tiana didn't want to think about what that meant. Didn't want to consider how deeply Hope had attached to her in just minutes, or why the thought made her chest tighten with equal parts joy and fear. Because she knew what attachment meant. She knew what losing it felt like, too. "Here," he said softly. "Let me take her." Their fingers brushed as he reached out. A simple touch, barely a graze. But it sent a jolt straight through her. Their eyes locked blue, meeting deep brown, and for a heartbeat, the world blurred. The machines fell away. The walls, the guilt, the grief. Everything dimmed, leaving only the two of them suspended in something wordless and terrifyingly intimate. Connection. Too much connection. Tiana tore her gaze away first. She had to. Her heart was pounding in her ears with a rhythm she didn't recognize, or maybe one she had tried to forget. Marcus adjusted Hope against his chest, holding her with a gentleness that didn't match his powerful frame. He kept staring at the baby's relaxed features, brushing a thumb across her cheek in stunned wonder. Then quietly he spoke. "I felt so helpless," he admitted. "All night, all day. These last weeks, really. Like I'm pretending to be a father. But I don't know how to reach her. She cries like she's grieving the world, and I can't give her what she needs." His voice broke again. "I didn't know if I could keep her alive." His confession hit Tiana like a punch. Because she knew helplessness intimately. She knew the suffocating guilt. The nights of wondering if she had done enough. The days of replaying every missed sign, every what if. "You did keep her alive," she said quietly. He gave a small wounded laugh. "No, Tiana. You did." She shook her head, but he stepped closer, close enough that she could see the faint stubble along his jaw, the shadows beneath his eyes, the way grief had carved itself into his features. "I don't know how to thank you," he whispered. "I don't think I ever could." Tiana's breath wavered. She wanted to tell him he didn't owe her anything. She wanted to pretend this meant nothing more than a medical emergency. She wanted to walk away before her heart forgot the difference between her pain and his hope. But then he said her name, Tiana. Soft, slow, like he was tasting it, like her name meant something to him. She swallowed hard. Something was wrong. She could feel it. There was a pull between them, dangerous, fragile, magnetic, that had nothing to do with hunger or milk or biology. Something emotional. Something neither of them had permission to feel. Because he was grieving a wife he loved. Because she was grieving a son she lost. Because their worlds, socially, racially, economically, shouldn't bend to meet in any way that mattered. But here they were, meeting anyway. Hope stirred softly, and both of them looked down at the same time. Their heads nearly touched. Their breaths mingled in the quiet space between them. And for one dizzying second, Tiana felt the rush of a future she wasn't prepared to imagine. A future she had no right to imagine. She stepped back quickly, too quickly. I should go, she said, her voice barely steady. Marcus straightened a little, as if grounding himself. Of course. You need rest. You've already done more than I could ever ask. He paused, then added quietly, Please don't disappear after tonight. The plea lodged in her heart. She couldn't promise that. She shouldn't promise that. But when she met his eyes, those impossibly blue, unbearably vulnerable eyes, something inside her cracked again. I won't, she whispered before she could stop herself. It was a lie. Or maybe it was the truth she wouldn't be brave enough to keep. Either way, the moment it left her lips, something shifted again. Something neither of them could take back. As she reached the door, Marcus's voice stopped her once more. Tiana. She turned. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't crying anymore either. He was simply watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. Hopeful, haunted, grateful, lost. I owe you more than I can repay, he said softly. And I don't know how to carry that. For the first time, she gave him a small, sad smile. Some things aren't meant to be paid back, Marcus. His answering breath was shaky. She left before she could change her mind, before she could look back and see something in his eyes that might swallow her whole. But she hadn't even made it halfway down the hall when she heard it. A soft cry. Not distressed, not panicked, but reaching. Hope's voice calling for her. And when Tiana looked back through the nursery window, Marcus was staring directly at her. Hope in his arms, tiny face crumpled with longing. Their eyes met again, and the truth hit her so hard she stopped breathing. This wasn't a one-time miracle. This was the beginning of something neither of them were ready for. Something beautiful, something dangerous, something inevitable. 3 days passed before Tiana found herself standing on the wide porch of a pastel blue shotgun house, tucked under the canopy of ancient oaks in the Garden District. The late afternoon sun cast soft brushstrokes of gold across the wooden steps, and the breeze carried the faint scent of Magnolia's New Orleans in its most disarming form. In her hand, she clutched her phone. The message on the screen glowed back at her. The doors unlocked. Hope's waiting. Marcus. Her heart stumbled. There was something too intimate about that. Too familiar. Too comfortable for a man she had known less than a week. But the memory of Hope's desperate cries, and the way she had quieted the moment she touched Tiana, pulled her forward. She pushed the door open, and the world-tilting sensation returned instantly. Inside, sunlight poured through sheer curtains, scattering warm light across hardwood floors, polished by generations. Jazz drifted from an old speaker, Louis Armstrong, warm and velvety, wrapping itself around the room like a soft embrace. Marcus stood in the center of the living room, swaying gently with Hope in his arms. Her tiny cheek was pressed against his chest, but the moment she sensed movement near the door, her little head jerked up, her dark honey-colored eyes found Tiana, and just like that her arms lifted reaching, as if she recognized her, as if she'd been waiting for her. Tiana's breath caught. She had expected longing, maybe fussing, but not this unmistakable spark of recognition. This small, instinctive plea to be held by a woman who wasn't her mother, and wasn't family, and wasn't anyone she had reason to know. But maybe babies didn't need reasons. Maybe sometimes they simply knew. Marcus turned at the shift in Hope's movement. When his eyes landed on Tiana, the relief on his face was immediate and unguarded. "You came," he said quietly. Not an accusation, not a command, just a truth he hadn't been sure enough to believe. Tiana swallowed and forced her voice steady. "I said I would." Hope chirped out a tiny sound, half whine, half plea, and little fists reached for her again. "Okay," Tiana murmured, her chest tightening. "Okay, sweetheart, I'm here." Marcus transferred the baby into her arms with a gentleness that always surprised her. His fingers brushed her wrist by accident, or perhaps not by accident, and she felt her pulse leap in response. Hope settled instantly, as if Tiana's presence rewired her entire nervous system, as if she'd found her missing heartbeat. Marcus watched them with a look that was part wonder, part gratitude, and something else, something softer and far more dangerous. A man seeing a possibility he had no right to imagine. Dinner was simple gumbo simmering on the stove, filling the kitchen with rich, savory warmth. Tiana hadn't realized how deeply she had missed the sensation of being cared for until the first spoonful hit her tongue. Her body reacted instantly, like someone thawing out after months of cold. "You cook?" she asked, surprised. "My grandmother made sure all her grandkids knew their way around a kitchen," Marcus said with a faint smile. "She always said surviving in New Orleans without knowing how to cook was a sin." "Well," Tiana murmured, "I'd say you're safe." Her words earned a soft chuckle from him, one she felt more than heard. But beneath the domestic sweetness, under the faint hum of jazz and clinking of spoons, tension simmered. The invisible line between their lives, his world of generational privilege and her world of quiet resilience, hung between them like a curtain neither dared to draw open. When Hope finally dozed off after nursing her tiny body heavy with milk and contentment, Tiana laid her into the bassinet Marcus had placed beside the dining table. The sight of the baby sleeping so peacefully pierced her in places she thought had already healed over. Marcus must have seen something shift in her expression, because his voice softened to something nearly fragile. "You still hurt, don't you?" he asked carefully, not prying, not pitying, simply seeing her. No one did that. Tiana sat back in her chair, inhaling slowly. Most people avoided the subject of David as though mentioning her son might reopen some wound she was supposed to be over by now. But Marcus's question wasn't clumsy. It wasn't presumptuous. It was human. She nodded. "I thought I'd gotten used to it," she admitted. "But when I heard Hope crying that night, it all came back so fast it scared me. My body reacted before I could think. I didn't know I still had anything left to give." Marcus's jaw tightened, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "And yet, you gave it anyway," he said quietly. "To my daughter." There was too much emotion in his voice, gratitude, guilt, and something warmer, something that made her pulse trip. "Tiana, you didn't just help her that night. You pulled me out of a place I didn't even know how to climb out of." She looked up sharply. His blue eyes held hers without flinching. "I meant what I said at the hospital," he continued. "You saved us, both of us." She swallowed. "I didn't do it for you." A slow exhale. "I know. Maybe that's why it meant so much." The silence that followed was thick, not heavy but full. The kind of quiet where words weren't needed because everything important was held in the space between two breaths. Outside, the sun slipped lower, turning the sky into a sweep of lavender and gold. A warm twilight settled into the house like a blessing, and Tiana felt something she hadn't felt in months. Home. Not because the house was beautiful, though it was. Not because Marcus looked at her differently than anyone ever had, though he did. But because Hope's tiny sighs filled the air like music. And for the first time, Tiana didn't feel like an intruder in her own grief. She felt needed, wanted, known, dangerously known. When she finally rose to leave, Marcus walked her to the porch. The outside air was cooler now, fragrant with night-blooming jasmine. Tiana. His voice stopped her as she reached the last step. Yes, she asked, turning. His gaze flickered to the sleeping baby visible through the window, then back to her. Will you come tomorrow? He asked, barely louder than a breath. Hope sleeps better after you're here. And he hesitated. And I think I do too. The truth in his voice sent a tremor through her. She should say no. She should protect herself. She should walk away before anything became too entangled, too emotional, too irreversible. But her eyes drifted to Hope, peaceful, safe, loved, and the decision formed itself before she could resist. Yes, she whispered. Tomorrow. Something loosened in Marcus's expression. A tension uncoiled. A warmth bloomed. And just like that, the pull between them tightened, quiet and visible, impossible to ignore. As she walked down the path, leading away from the pastel blue house, Tiana knew the truth with sudden clarity. She had stepped through a door she might never be able to close again. And tomorrow, she'd be walking straight back through it. What she did not know, what she could not have known, was that outside forces were already stirring. For Marcus, for Hope, for her. For every door opened, another door would soon slam shut. Darkness, judgment, unwelcome eyes. Tomorrow would bring more than another sunset in the Garden District. Tomorrow would bring the first real test. 2 weeks slid by quietly, as though the universe had decided to suspend real time around them. Tiana came to Marcus's house almost every afternoon, stepping through the pastel blue doorway with a familiarity that frightened her more than she ever admitted. Things were becoming too natural, too easy, too much like a life she was never meant to have. Hope would lift her little arms the instant she heard Tiana's voice whimpering if anyone else tried to hold her first. Marcus always had the rocking chair positioned just right, and a blanket folded neatly over the armrest. And the kitchen, the warm sunlit heart of the house, slowly transformed into a place Tiana knew in the way one knows their own childhood home. When had that happened? At first, it had been necessity, then routine. Now, it felt like belonging. And belonging was dangerous. But the most dangerous thing wasn't the routine. It was the way Marcus watched her. Not with hunger, not yet, but with something perilously close to longing. The kind that made her pulse quicken and her skin heat when she felt his gaze linger a little too long. The kind that made her aware of every small movement she made, the way she brushed Hope's cheek, the way she pushed her curls behind her ear, the way she laughed more freely in his house than anywhere else. It didn't matter that he tried to mask it. It didn't matter that she pretended she didn't notice. Their eyes met too often for it to be accidental. And every time something unspoken flickered between them, something they both feared. One evening with rain threatening outside and warm jazz floating through the open window, Marcus broke the fragile illusion of safety. He was stirring a pot on the stove, though he'd forgotten to watch the flame. Hope slept in Tiana's arms, heavy with milk, and the kind of trust only a child could give so freely. "My mother called today," he said suddenly. Tiana's hands stilled. She didn't look at him. Couldn't. "Oh," she managed. "She wants me to come back to Chicago. Says she's worried Hope is losing stability." He gave a bitter laugh. "She didn't say your name. She didn't have to." A cold awareness threaded down Tiana's spine. She tightened her hold on Hope, instinctively protective. "Trouble," Marcus murmured. That's the word she used. Tiana didn't need the translation. She'd heard variations of that word her entire life. Women like her were always trouble. Too black, too different, too close to something wealthy white families wanted to keep untouched. She exhaled slowly, steadying herself. "And what do you want?" Marcus set the spoon down and turned fully toward her. He looked tired, haunted, but steady. "I want to stay here," he said. "In New Orleans. With Hope. With—" His voice faltered, and he caught himself before he said too much. "With the life we've built these past weeks." The impact of his words hit her with startling force. Her heart stumbled. Her breath trembled. Her body went still as stone. He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. Tiana tore her gaze away, afraid of what might spill out if she kept looking at him. Afraid that she might already be too invested in something she had no right to touch. She stood abruptly, shifting Hope in her arms. "We should put her down," she murmured. But when she moved past him, Marcus reached out instinctively to help steady the baby, and his fingers brushed the back of her hand. Just a glancing contact. Barely more than a breath. But it felt like a spark had jumped between them, lighting something she'd buried beneath months of grief and self-preservation. Tiana froze. So did he. Their eyes locked, and the world shrank to a point of trembling heat, where skin met skin. He whispered her name like a confession. "Tiana." The sound of it, rough, unguarded, sent a tremor through her. She stepped back, as if burned. "Marcus, this is—" She swallowed hard. "This is dangerous." "For you?" he asked quietly. "Or for me?" "For both of us." He took a slow step toward her. Not threatening, not demanding, just answering something invisible between them. "Because I'm white?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. A sharp inhale tore through her chest. "That's part of it. And because I'm wealthy. That too." And because he continued softly, "You think you're not enough for me." The words sliced through her defenses so cleanly she couldn't pretend they didn't land. She looked down at Hope, asleep and warm in her arms, because the alternative was looking into the eyes of a man who saw too much. "I don't fit into your world," she said, her voice a soft ache. "And I've already lost too much to risk losing anything else." Marcus's expression changed, tender, wounded understanding. Then he nodded once. "I'm scared too," he said, barely audible. The honesty of it nearly undid her. Before she could respond, before either of them could take another dangerous step, Hope stirred and let out a sudden wail, shattering the moment like glass. Tiana exhaled shakily, grateful for the interruption. Terrified of it too. Marcus looked away first, running a hand through his hair, as though physically pulling himself back into safer territory. "I'll warm a bottle," he murmured, though they both knew Hope never took one when Tiana was around. But the brief electricity, the spark they'd both felt, lingered in the air, humming like a dangerous secret. It was small, barely visible, but one spark is all it takes. One breath, one shift, one more accidental touch, and everything could ignite. As Tiana rocked Hope, pretending to focus on soothing the crying baby, her mind whispered a truth she wasn't ready to face. Something had started between them, and if they weren't careful, it would consume them both. But when she lifted her eyes, Marcus was watching her again, quiet, conflicted, wanting. And she knew careful was no longer an option. The morning began with a strange stillness, one of those quiet dawns when the world feels like it's holding its breath. Tiana didn't know why she decided to come early. She just needed to see hope, needed to be sure that yesterday's fragile moment between her and Marcus hadn't ruined whatever fragile balance held the three of them together. The pastel blue house looked softer in the morning light, almost sleepy, almost safe. But the moment she stepped inside, she knew something was wrong. A woman stood in the center of the living room, the early sun glinting off her pearl earrings and the polished leather of her designer handbag. Her posture was rigid, elegant, commanding, like someone used to entering rooms and owning them instantly. She turned at the sound of the door opening. Her eyes swept over Tiana in a single slicing stroke, cold, assessing, sharp enough to leave a sting. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice clipped and icy. Not, "What's your name?" Not, "Can I help you?" Who are you? Like, Tiana was a trespasser, an intruder. Tiana swallowed. I'm Hope's nurse. I come by to help with..." "So it's true." The woman stepped closer, each click of her heels a judgment. "I am Barbara Bell, Marcus's mother." The name hit Tiana with the force of a door slamming shut. Before she could respond, Marcus rushed in from the kitchen, his expression draining of color the instant he saw who stood between them. "Mom," he blurted. "What are you doing here?" Barbara's lips curved into something like triumph. "It seems I arrived at exactly the right moment." She turned back to Tiana, her gaze sharpening like a blade. "This is who you've allowed into your home," she demanded of Marcus, though her eyes never left Tiana. "A nurse. A woman who spends every day here without supervision. A woman her stare swept down, lingering in a way that made Tiana's stomach twist so clearly from a world that will never align with ours." The words were poised, but the venom underneath them was unmistakable. Marcus's face hardened. "Mom, stop." Barbara ignored him. Instead, she took a step closer to Tiana, who had gone perfectly still, like prey cornered. "I wondered why you refused to come back to Chicago." Barbara continued. "Why you insisted on staying in this city, clinging to ghosts and sentiment." Her chin lifted. "Now I see. You've invited someone else into the void Charlotte left." The room froze. Tiana felt her heartbeat stumble once sharply, then drop into a painful rhythm. She'd been called many things in her life, dismissed, undervalued, overlooked, but never spoken about like this, never made to feel like a stain. Marcus's voice broke through the tension, raw and furious. "You've crossed every line, Mom. Every single one." Barbara spun on him with a look of outrage. "I am protecting your daughter. You are acting like a man out of his mind, letting some stranger waltz into your home, into your life, into Hope's routine." "She saved her," Marcus snapped. "She replaced Charlotte." Barbara's voice rose sharp enough to crack glass. "Or haven't you noticed? The way she carries your child as if she birthed her. The way she looks at you. The way you look at her." The accusation struck like a blow. Marcus flinched. Tiana felt her throat close, heat stinging her eyes. Barbara's gaze whipped back to her full of scorn. "Charlotte has barely been gone half a year. And this is the woman you choose to bring into your daughter's life, into your home, into your bed. Eventually, I'm sure. Enough." Marcus shouted, voice echoing off the walls. But it was too late. Something fragile inside Tiana snapped, not loudly, not violently, just a quiet shattering. She knew she wouldn't be able to piece back together again. She turned away, blinking hard, and began gathering her things with trembling hands. her stethoscope, her small tote, the blanket she used when Hope fell asleep on her. She didn't look at either of them. "I'm leaving." She managed her voice barely more than a whisper. Hope doesn't need to hear any of this. Marcus lunged forward. "Tiana, wait. Please don't go. Not like this." She forced a small, brittle smile. "Marcus, your mother is right." He froze. No, we pushed the boundaries. I pushed them." She swallowed hard. "I came here to help Hope, not to be the reason your family falls apart. You're not. But I am." She breathed, her voice cracking. "Your world and mine were never meant to collide. And the moment they did, everything got complicated." He stepped closer, desperate, but she lifted a hand, gentle final stopping him. "Hope needs stability," she said. "And you need to do what's best for her, Marcus, without me clouding things." Tiana turned toward the door. Her heart felt like an open wound with every step. Behind her, Hope, sensing the shift in the room, began to cry. Loud, high, heart-wrenching. The sound cut clean through Tiana, ripping her open. She paused. Just for a moment. Long enough to feel her resolve splinter. Long enough to hear Marcus's voice, shaken, frantic, trying to soothe the baby. "Tiana," he called again, voice thick with something that sounded a lot like fear. "Please don't walk away." She didn't turn around. If she did, she knew she would stay. "I'm sorry," she whispered, barely audible. "For everything." And then she stepped out onto the porch, out into the harsh morning light, leaving behind the crying baby she loved, and the man who looked at her like she was a miracle he wasn't allowed to keep. Inside the house, the door stayed open behind her. Marcus didn't slam it. He didn't shut it. He just stood in the doorway, holding Hope with shaking hands, watching Tiana walk away, as though a part of him was being torn out. For the first time in his life, after boardrooms and mergers and Fortune magazine covers, Marcus Bell found himself powerless. Powerless to stop the one person he needed most from slipping out of his world. Powerless against the mother whose disapproval could ruin everything. Powerless against the truth that felt like a punch to the gut. He was losing her. And this time, unlike that night in the hospital, there was no miracle to save them. Only the echo of a closing door and the hollow ache of something precious slipping away. The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and avoidance. Two things Tiana had mastered long before she ever met Marcus Bell. She took double shifts at the hospital, volunteered to cover nights, skipped breaks, ignored her phone. Anything to drown out the quiet moments when her mind drifted back to the pastel blue house in the Garden District, or to the tiny fingers that used to curl around hers, or to the way Marcus whispered her name the night everything had begun to unravel. But no matter how fast she walked or how hard she worked, she couldn't outrun the ache. She missed them. God, she missed them. Hope's soft breaths against her chest. Marcus's warm, steady gaze. The way that house felt like somewhere she could finally belong. Now it felt like she had lost 2 families in one lifetime. By the 3rd evening, her eyes stung from lack of sleep. Her hands trembled with fatigue, and her heart felt hollow. She was charting quietly at the NICU station when a silhouette appeared in the hallway, poised, elegant, unmistakable. Regina Bell, Hope's grandmother, Marcus's grandmother, the matriarch who carried herself like she was born inside a symphony. Regina walked with the stately grace of someone who had once commanded entire ballrooms and still remembered the choreography of power. "Tiana Brooks?" she asked softly, though her voice held a firmness that needed no volume. Tiana straightened, suddenly aware of the wrinkles in her scrubs and the fatigue in her bones. "Yes, ma'am." Regina's expression held no judgment. only an empathy that pierced through Tiana's defenses faster than she could rebuild them. "Marcus told me you left," the older woman said. "And I imagine I know why." Tiana felt her throat tighten. "It's complicated." Regina gave a small, knowing nod. "Pain always is." From her elegant purse, she pulled out an envelope, the paper soft and worn, as if held too many times by trembling hands. "Before Charlotte died, Regina said she gave me this. She wrote it when she was 7 months pregnant. She asked me to pass it on to the woman who would one day love Marcus and hope the way she knew someone eventually would." Tiana's heart stopped. "No," she whispered. I can't." But Regina pressed the envelope into her palm gently. "You deserve to read it, child." Her fingers shaking, Tiana slid her thumb under the flap and unfolded the letter. Charlotte's handwriting flowed across the page, artistic, graceful, alive. And then she read, "If you're reading this, it means Marcus is no longer alone. It means hope is being held by someone who loves her. It means my worst fear has come true, and my deepest wish as well. Please do not feel guilt. It took me a long time to understand this, but love is not a single flame. It's a fire that grows when others join it. You are not replacing me. You are continuing me. Love Marcus if you can. Love Hope as if she came from your own body. That is not betrayal. That is the greatest gift you could ever give us." Charlotte. The words blurred before she reached the signature. Her knees buckled. She sank onto the nearest pew in the small hospital chapel, the letter trembling between her fingers. A sob tore out of her, raw, uncontrollable, the kind that came from a place deeper than grief, deeper than fear. Regina sat beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Charlotte was wise," the older woman murmured. "She sensed things before any of us did, including her own death." Tiana cried harder. I don't want to take anyone's place," she whispered. "And you're not," Regina said firmly. "Charlotte saw you, before she even knew your name. Hope has chosen you. Marcus has chosen you." Tiana shook her head helplessly. "His mother hates me." Regina scoffed. "Barbara Bell hates anything she can't control. She will get over herself, or she will be forced to. Don't let a frightened woman decide the fate of your heart." Before Tiana could respond, the chapel doors flew open. A doctor rushed in breathless. "Tiana, you're needed in the NICU. Baby Hope Bell was just admitted, fever of 103, severe dehydration. Marcus is asking for you." Tiana's world snapped into focus. Everything, fear, confusion, heartbreak fell away. There was only one instinct left. Go. She ran past the chapel pews, past the doctor, past the waiting room, where nurses whispered. Regina followed close behind, her own face taut with worry. When they reached the NICU corridor, Tiana saw him, Marcus, standing over Hope's crib, his hands in his hair, his shoulders shaking with panic. His suit was wrinkled, his face pale, his eyes red-rimmed and frantic. The moment he saw Tiana, something inside him crumpled. "Tiana," he choked out. "Please." I didn't know what else to do. She won't eat. She won't stop crying. She needs you. He wasn't the billionaire anymore. He wasn't the man who filled Forbes covers or owned skyscrapers. He was just a father, breaking open in front of her. And she was the only person he trusted to hold the pieces. Without hesitation, Tiana reached into the crib and lifted Hope into her arms. The baby was hot too. Hot, her cries weak and hoarse. But the second Hope felt Tiana's heartbeat, she pressed her face into her chest, rooting instinctively, desperately. Tiana's breath caught. She turned her back to the room, shielding Hope, as she adjusted her scrubs and guided the infant to latch. The moment Hope found her, her cries softened, then faded. Her tiny body trembled in relief. Tiana held her close, rocking gently. It felt like life flowing back into both of them. Behind her, she heard a strangled sound. Marcus. She turned, Hope still nursing, and saw him covering his mouth with his hand. Tears streaming freely. "You came," he whispered. "You came back." Tiana swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "I was never really gone." He stepped toward her slowly, like a man approaching a miracle he feared might vanish if he moved too quickly. "I can't lose her," he said, voice cracking. "And I can't lose you." Tiana's heart twisted. This man, this fragile, grieving, fierce father, this man who had held so much pain for so long. She had tried to run, but love had outrun her. Hope's small fingers curled into the fabric of her scrubs as if claiming her, and then Marcus reached out, hesitant, trembling, and wrapped his hand gently around Tiana's. Not dominating, not assuming, just asking. His thumb brushed her knuckles. A question, a plea, a confession. "Tiana," he whispered, "I'm in love with you. I think I've been falling since the moment you walked into that nursery." Her breath hitched. For weeks, she had carried fear like a second skin. Fear of being too much. Fear of not being enough. Fear of stepping into the space left behind by a woman she respected and mourned. But Charlotte's letter changed everything. Love wasn't betrayal. It was permission. A continuation. A bridge between what was lost and what could still be found. Tiana looked down at Hope, nursing peacefully against her. Then at Marcus, his eyes full of a fragile hope that mirrored her own. And for the first time since losing David, the fear inside her loosened its grip. For the first time, she didn't flinch from the truth. She lifted her free hand and touched Marcus's cheek softly, reverently. "Marcus," she whispered, "I'm not scared anymore." His breath caught. Hope suckled quietly between them, her tiny hand resting over both of theirs. And in that small hospital room, under the soft humming of machines and distant echoes of footsteps, Tiana understood love had not come to replace what she lost. It had come to show her she could still live, still feel, still choose a future that against all odds had already chosen her. Hope recovered after 2 long days, days filled with whispered prayers, sleepless vigils, and the quiet terror that had pressed itself into Marcus's bones, until Tiana walked back into his world. Once Hope's fever finally broke, and her breathing steadied into soft, even rhythms, the weight that had crushed all 3 of them slowly lifted. But something else rose in its place. Something warm. Something undeniable. Something that felt a lot like destiny. When Marcus walked Tiana out of the hospital that evening, he didn't let her go. Not her hand. Not her presence. Not the small piece of his heart she had unknowingly carried from the moment she held his daughter for the first time. Each step they took was a quiet surrender to the truth neither of them could push away anymore. "Let me take you home," he murmured. And he didn't mean her apartment. He meant his home, the place where she had become more than a visitor, a place that had begun to echo with her laughter, her lullabies, her warmth. Tiana didn't ask for clarification. She didn't need to. Instead, she nodded softly and slipped her fingers between his, something she had never allowed herself to do until now. It felt like crossing an invisible threshold. New Orleans at night was a dream painted in gold. The French Quarter glowed with lantern light and stories, shadows dancing along wrought iron balconies, the air humming with jazz spilling from doorways and open windows. Couples strolled hand in hand, the scent of caramelized sugar, drifting from nearby cafes, mingling with the richer, older perfume of magnolia trees. Hope slept peacefully against Marcus's chest, bundled in a soft sling, her tiny fist occasionally tightening around the fabric of his shirt. The three of them walked as if they had always been a unit, a family. People turned to look not in judgment, but in curiosity, sometimes in quiet admiration. A black woman, with warmth in her smile and strength in her posture. A white man with grief in his eyes and devotion in every step. A biracial baby girl tucked safely between them. Two worlds that weren't supposed to meet. Walking in perfect rhythm. When they turned onto a quieter street, one washed in golden lamplight and lined with old stone buildings, Marcus slowed. "Tiana," he said softly. She turned, the warm glow settling across her skin, illuminating her like a celestial being brought down to earth. Her curls caught the light, turning them into halos, and Marcus felt something inside him twist and ache so deep, it felt like it had lived in him long before he'd met her. "Yes," she whispered, but the question died on her lips. Marcus had dropped to one knee. The street fell into a stunned hush, like the city itself knew this moment mattered. The only sound left was distant jazz drifting through the air like a blessing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring, gold warm, timeless. At its center sat a luminous pearl soft as moonlight and impossibly pure. It wasn't extravagant. It wasn't loud. It was intimate, full of history, love, and the quiet strength of the bellwomen who had worn it before. Marcus held it like something sacred. "Tiana," he began, voice low and unsteady. "When Charlotte died, I thought the best parts of me died with her." Tiana's breath caught. He looked up at her, not with guilt, not with hesitation, but with a truth he could no longer hold back. But somehow he continued, "You walked into my life with your strength, your gentleness, your music, and you breathed life back into a heart I thought was beyond saving." Tiana felt tears prick at her eyes. "I'm not asking you to replace her," he said, "because no one could. Not you, not anyone." A soft exhale. "But I am asking you to be here with me, now, to write the next chapters with me, to build a future with hope, a future we never thought we'd deserve." He reached up and took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "You aren't erasing my past," he whispered. "You're helping me live again." Hope stirred against him, her tiny voice chiming in a soft babble that sounded astonishingly like a word. "Like Mama." Tiana pressed a hand to her mouth, a soft sob escaping her. Marcus swallowed hard, emotion thickening his voice. "Tiana Brooks," he said, steadying himself with a breath, "move in with us. Be Hope's mother. Be my partner, my home, my wife." The pearl glowed in his palm. Hope slept between them, like a small beating heart that belonged to both. The street around them shimmered with golden warmth. Tiana felt her entire world tilt. She saw the girl she had been, who grew up in the 7 wards surrounded by love, but never luxury, who lost her child and thought she'd lose herself too. She saw Marcus, the white billionaire from a family she had never imagined, being close to a man shaped by grief, but softened by devotion. 2 worlds that should have collided and shattered. Yet here they were, standing at the intersection of heartbreak and rebirth, choosing each other. Her voice trembled, but her heart was steady when she finally spoke. "Marcus." She laughed softly through her tears. "I never imagined a life like this. With you. With hope." She inhaled shakily. "But I'm not afraid anymore," she whispered. She nodded. "Yes," she breathed. "I'll marry you." Marcus didn't stand so much as he rose into her, pulling her into his arms with a kind of reverence, as if afraid she might dissolve into starlight if he held her too tight. Their foreheads touched. Their breaths mingled. Hope murmured contentedly between them. And somewhere in the quarter, a saxophone began to play the unmistakable opening of What a Wonderful World, the perfect song, the perfect night, the perfect beginning. Marcus kissed her slow tender filled with awe, a kiss that tasted like a promise, like healing, like fate rewritten. And in that moment, bathed in golden lamplight and jazz, they stopped being two broken souls. They became a family. 1 year later. Mercy General Hospital. The same halls where grief had once swallowed Tiana whole now greeted her with soft, familiar light. The memory of her first night here, shaking, shattered. Terrified, felt distant, blurred by a year filled with miracles she never imagined she would live to see. Today, she walked those halls, not as the broken mother who once fell apart in them, but as a woman reborn. In her arms slept a tiny boy barely 2 weeks old, warm and impossibly small. Charles David Bell, her son, her second chance at motherhood. His lashes fluttered against her chest as he dreamed, and when the light from the windows touched the delicate skin behind his ear, the faint crescent-shaped birthmark appeared just like the one her first child David once had. It struck her every time. A ghost, a blessing, a whisper from the past. Maybe all three. Another pair of footsteps approached, faster, wobblier. Hope, now 15 months old, burst into view with curls bouncing wildly. She wrapped her arms around Tiana's leg, looking up with wide, adoring eyes. "Baby," she declared proudly, pointing at Charlie. Tiana laughed, softly brushing the girl's cheek. "Yes, baby. Your brother." Hope beamed with the confidence of a toddler who believed love was infinite, and in this family, she wasn't wrong. A moment later, Marcus appeared tall and steady, and radiating the quiet joy of a man who had come back from the edge and found life waiting for him on the other side. He slipped an arm around Tiana's waist, leaning in to kiss the top of her head. "You two are a sight I'll never get used to," he murmured. Tiana looked up at him, the man she had once feared loving the man she now couldn't imagine breathing without. The silver in his blue eyes glowed with pride as he gazed at their children, their family. For a moment, she let herself soak it in the peace, the wholeness, the part of her soul that finally felt unbroken. It was then that a nurse hurried down the hall toward them. "Tiana," she said, breathless, "there's a new mother in recovery. Baby won't latch, and the mom is not doing well emotionally. I think she needs someone like you. Someone like you. Someone who had walked through fire. Someone who had seen loss, survived it, and learned how to hold not only her own heart, but others." Tiana glanced at Marcus. He didn't hesitate. He nodded gently, taking Charlie from her arms and reaching for Hope's hand. "Go," he said quietly. "You're the one who understands them best." Her heart swelled. This man, this family never tried to cage her. They let her be who she was meant to become. She slipped into the recovery room. Inside, a young mother sat trembling in a corner chair, clutching a red, wailing newborn to her chest. Her cheeks were wet, her breaths shallow and frantic, the same terror Tiana once carried inside her like a second heartbeat. "Sweetheart," Tiana said softly, kneeling beside her. "What's your name?" The girl sniffed. "Jessica." Tiana smiled gently. "That's a beautiful name. I'm Tiana." Jessica blinked at her as though trying to anchor herself to the presence of someone steady. I don't know what I'm doing," she whispered. "She won't eat. I think she hates me. I'm failing already." Tiana reached out slowly, offering her arms. "Can I help you?" A small, desperate nod. When Tiana lifted the baby, something inside her shifted the same instinct that had awakened the night she first held Hope. The tiny girl calmed almost immediately, pressing her face against Tiana's chest, as though drawn to a warmth that understood grief, fear, and the sharp edges of love. Jessica watched in stunned disbelief. "How did you—" Tiana brushed her thumb over the baby's cheek. "I've lived this moment," she said quietly. "I lost my first child. I thought I would never be whole again. But a year ago, something found me. Someone found me. And it saved my life." Jessica's tears fell harder. You got through it." Tiana nodded. "And you will too. Not because you have to be perfect, but because your love is enough. It's already enough." Jessica leaned forward and clung to her, her cries soft and shaking. A young woman collapsing into the safety of another mother who had walked the same dark path. Tiana held her steady and solid until the trembling eased. When she stepped out into the hallway again, Marcus was waiting. Charlie slept on his shoulder. Hope dozed against his other side. Their heads leaned toward him like petals toward sunlight. Regina stood beside him, elegant, wise eyes soft with affection. When she saw Tiana, she touched Marcus's arm and whispered, "She truly is a gift of fate." Marcus didn't look away from his wife. "She's everything Charlotte hoped would come after her," he said softly. "She's the bridge between what I lost and everything I have now." Tiana's breath caught when their eyes met. She walked toward them, and the hallway seemed to glow warm golden, almost sacred. From her neck hung the necklace she wore every day now. David's angel wing charm resting beside a tiny silver note symbol representing Charlotte's love of music. Two lives that were no longer here, yet somehow walked with her, guiding each step she took. Guardian spirits of a story that had begun with loss and ended with a family. She took Charlie back into her arms. Hope wrapped her small arms around Tiana's knee again. Marcus leaned in and kissed her cheek, soft, reverent, full of meaning. And Tiana understood something profound. A year ago, she had lost everything she thought defined her. Today, she stood in the center of a life richer than anything she had dared to imagine. A circle had closed. A new one had opened. And she was no longer afraid of where it led. Because New Orleans had taught her something, pain can break you. But love, if you let it in, can rebuild you into someone even stronger. In a city where jazz flowed like prayer and sorrow bloomed into hope, Tiana finally felt whole. And the music of her life, the one she thought had ended long ago, began again.